It is 11 in the morning, and what are you looking at? It's Sunday. I can do what I want. And I'm going to talk about the Suspiria remake, so cheers. Hope that label didn't show. Oh, God. So I realize some people may perceive me as being a bit of a curmudgeon talking about these new movies, and I understand. I understand that, and just know, like, this will be you one day. It's unavoidable. And I'm also going to say two things. A, in my own defense, I rarely go into a movie expecting or wanting to hate it. That's not what I'm in this for, and I don't go out of my way to subject myself to bad times. And when it comes to stuff like this, like a new sequel to Halloween or like a contemporary remake of Suspiria, I am all for. I want to love them, and I went into both of these movies wanting to love them, or at least like them. And there was a lot to like about Suspiria. I'm gonna be honest. Ultimately, it didn't stick the landing for me, but there's some cool shit about it. It definitely stands apart and in its own way justifies its existence. If you're going to do a remake, I think this is how you should do it. So I definitely appreciate the approach they took. But the appreciation is purely objective for me. It's enough, but subjectively, I just didn't find myself enjoying it at the end of the day. I thought there was a lot of potential there. Some of it which was fulfilled, and some of it was just sorely unfulfilled, in my humble opinion. I like the fact that, and I feel like, what else are you going to do if you're remaking a film that is so renowned and legendary for being an aesthetic piece, a style piece? Some could say, like, sacrificing substance for style. I would say, personally, using style as substance, and I think people would support me on that. So yeah, you kind of do have to go the opposite way, and I get that, and I respect it. What that leaves us with is a very kind of more handheldy, realistic approach in terms of photography, which was cool, and I thought really worked. But also this just drab, dreary color palette of off-whites and yellows and browns and maroons and rusts. Little pops of color here and there that do stand out, and in a good way. But ultimately, for me anyway, a film that's just unpleasant to look at. And some films go for that in a way that seems to work with a lot of audiences. The Saw films and Fight Club both have this very sickly green and yellow color palette, which I just don't enjoy looking at, so I don't really go back to those movies at all. But I think a lot of people do, so they're just more wired for it. But Suspiria, one of the things Argento liked to do was seduce the audience with colors and photography and music, visual aesthetic, and then when your guard was down, pummel you with violence, and it was all about that chocolate and peanut butter juxtaposition of kind of a sensualized aesthetic, and sometimes in giallos, sexualized, definitely, with the juxtaposition of shock. So what we have here with Suspiria, aside from a really, I think, fine score by Tom York, is a film with a very challenging, maybe even confrontational aesthetic. It kind of dares you to suspend disbelief and slip into its world, where Suspiria was like, get the fuck in here, immediately. Those airport doors open, and you were just in the world of that fucking movie. Whether you like it or not, if you like it, great, because it is so goddamn immersive. Where this one, you really have to do more work, I think, to get into the movie. And that also includes listening to what turned out to me to be kind of an exhausting amount of dialogue. And that might have just been, there could have been external factors contributing to that. I don't think it means that I'm a I'm a rube by any means, and quit talking, blow something up. You know, it's not like that necessarily, but the film is 2.5 hours long, and an awful lot of it is dialogue. And again, that might have been a conscious choice to kind of get away from the Suspiria thing, which was the story was told through visuals and music primarily. And most of the dialogue is very, because of the dubbing, just. But yeah, a shitload of dialogue in the remake, and I think it works against the film. You know, it'll build up a really good head of steam with a scare or a kill scene, and yeah, that kill scene is fucking great. I wish there was just a little bit more of that going on in this movie, and I don't mean that from like a gorehound, desensitized gorehound point of view, because there certainly is plenty of gore in this film, but none of it has that kind of impact. Not even the stuff in the third act, or the sixth act. Interestingly enough, for me, anyway. Yeah. I don't know. What else? We should talk about the score for a second. It's fine. And the fact that it is fine, that means that Tom York pulled off a hell of an accomplishment, because it is a thankless job stepping in to write a score to replace or even sit alongside the Goblin score, which is one of the most iconic in horror film history, like top 5, maybe top 3, I don't know. Certainly in my book it is. And he did fine. Most of the music is pretty good. The stuff that accompanies the dance sequences is fucking fantastic. So yeah, good job, Tom York. One of the best elements of the film. Much like Halloween. Good job to the composers. This is the year of the composer. How about that? We'll just, let's see. The whole love story subplot with the Doctor and the parallel between the divided coven of witches at the Tanz Academy and the divided East and West Berlin. I got that, but I wasn't quite sure what the motivation for it was. I don't really feel I get what the significance is of it yet, either of those two things. They might become more apparent on a second viewing, but unfortunately what that means is there's just a frustrating lack of takeaway for me on the first viewing, on an aesthetic level and on a story and theme level. I like the fact that they kind of went into the witches' behind the scenes lives a little bit more. It was still kind of hard to grok what their motivation was. You know, the motivation of the witches in the original was very, very simple, but very relatable, and it works. It's a little vague in this one for me. There are things that are kind of touched upon, like the idea of a dance piece being, dance being a language. You can have a dance piece that acts as a spell or an incantation, and I absolutely love that, and I would like to have seen a little bit more of that in the film, or at least see it kind of followed through a little bit. I loved the cast, and while I didn't really understand the necessity of the subplot with the Doctor and his wife, I loved, of course, how could you not love seeing Jessica Harper back? And yeah, the whole cast is fantastic, and I think they're all really well chosen for their roles. Tilda, of course. I liked how her old man makeup was very reminiscent of David Bowie's in The Hunger, which I'm sure was intentional. Dakota Johnson, fabulous job. I like her. I think she's a genuinely talented actress, and it was nice, I'll admit, seeing her wearing rope in something better than 50 Shades. Let's see. Chloe, I thought was a great choice for Patricia Hingle. But yeah, I don't know. Something about her ultimate fate too, just kind of like she just disappears for a while. Spoiler. I'm sorry. I'm not going to talk about. Anyway, I was lacking for me, and yeah, perhaps just a little bit too willfully obtuse, a little too willfully dense. And this is from somebody who has a pretty high tolerance for artsy fartsy. So I think it's saying something. I love this movie for what it is, and I think it deserves to exist, and I hope it does well. And I love seeing an all-female ensemble piece on the big screen. That's a really, really cool thing, and would love to see more of it. So I'm glad that Halloween is successful. I'm glad so many people out there had a good experience with it, and I hope the same for you with Suspiria. Again, this is all incredibly subjective and perhaps relevant to your age. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about that? I promise I won't tell you to get off my lawn.